Hey everybody, it's your host Marlon Gardenero. You're listening to the Divided States of America show. Today, real questions, real people. It's hard to close the gap, bridge the divide if we aren't talking. So, question number one. Does the GOP have a plan for inflation? I haven't heard it, and I looked. We'll talk about that, abortion, and more about loan forgiveness today on the Divided States of America show.
Welcome to the Divided States of America show, where your host, Marlon Gardenero, takes on the most divisive issues in our divided nation. We'll sort through the best and worst of politics and culture, asking questions and looking for answers that our two-ring, two-party circus has failed to provide. And here is your host, Marlon Gardenero.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Divided States of America show. I appreciate you tuning in live. I appreciate when you tune in later on a walk, at the gym, on a car ride, sitting around. Interested in politics, not so much the far left, the far right, the tit for tat, the constant arguing about nothing and solving essentially nothing. We understand when people get tired of that. I too get tired of that. But it's what we deal with. It's what we face. It's the reality of our world. But this show is designed for us to have real conversations, real talk, thoughtful, respectful conversations on ways to bridge the gap, on ways to make the issues that we're facing, I can't say go away, but not be as much of an issue as they are in the rhetoric. We don't have productive conversations on how we can make life better for the average Americans. We have biased conversations how we think we could make it better for us if people did things our way. What we haven't figured out is within our two-party system, no one is going to get everything they want. And we're more often than not getting nothing as a result of that quest for everything, and we aren't better off for it. So, you know, the goal of this program, again, is to have productive, respectful, thoughtful conversations about what we could be doing to make life better for the mainstream. The people who get up, go to work every day, just want to take care of their family, who right now don't have a voice, don't have an outlet. We've got two sides that spend more time pointing the finger at each other, hoping the other fails, than they do actually solving any problems for you and me. Now, remember, the litmus test for me with most of the subjects, most of the issues, most of the topics covered are long-term, my children, their children, our future for the common person with very basic interests. There are political elites. There are people with a greater interest and more money to spend to make what they're interested in happen. But for us regular folk, we'd like to see positive things happen for all of us. On yesterday's show, we talked about a positive from a horrible, tragic event, September 11, 2001, the attack on America by terrorists, the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, all of the places impacted and affected by the hijacking of airplanes. Not to go over that again, but to remind ourselves that on September 12th, we were united. To remind ourselves just this weekend in New Jersey, a stadium erupted singing our national anthem. And there are so many opportunities and ways where we could be together, should be together. But unfortunately, in our current political climate, it's easier for us to just go at it nonstop. So it's time again to start challenging some of those ideas. It's time to challenge that notion that this continual tit for tat, this continual back and forth serves some purpose other than to confirm what you thought before without you having to think about anything new, anything more, or about anyone else, which is typically how we align with one party versus another. I'd like to challenge that idea and get people thinking about what's best for we, the people, not me or my party. But the most topical, the biggest issue, yesterday, Joe Biden at the White House, South Lawn, celebrating the I don't know why they call it the Inflation Reduction Act. It's not designed to do that immediately. There may be some long-term impact, some long-term effect. It was a political name. It was one to invoke the spirit of doing something about inflation. But we know from our latest numbers, not much has changed. Not much has happened. We all know we'd like to see inflation go down. We know it impacts people who earn less more when they have to take more of their dollars. The fewer dollars that they may have for rent or food, clothing, the basic essentials, and the impact of inflation on them is far greater than people up the economic ladder. And those effects are real. I have big old American-made trucks, 3 of them. One normal-sized pickup, one dually, supersized, and a 2000 Excursion of all things. 2 of those are what we would call gas guzzlers. If they get 10 miles to the gallon going downhill in neutral, I'd be shocked. So I do okay. At least I try as a business owner to stay afloat. I've made some good decisions and bad, but I tell you what, paying $6.50 a gallon for fuel hurt. One of my sons drives one of the gas guzzlers, and believe me, it's time to change that. It's time to change that just from, the cost alone. But, you used to give your kid $10 for gas. I remember getting $5 and feeling like it would last a week. You put $20 in the tank of one of these behemoths, and it's a day or two. And your kid saying, hey, I need money for gas, gets real old. Don't get me wrong, my kid has a job. As a matter of fact, he has a company, and he does pretty well. But it's seasonal, and stretching those dollars year-round, I can imagine even for a kid is pretty hard. And for me, my family, school is his focus. That's his job. That's his priority. So I make sure we leave plenty of time for that, extracurriculars. But earning enough money to keep enough fuel in those trucks is hard. It doesn't matter how much money you make. The outlay of cash for gas is real. Well, those inflationary pressures are coming across the board for multiple reasons, multiple things. I had a chart up, put it back up. You can see where we are here in 2022, where inflation is up 8.3% in August, consumer price index, It would be up 6.3 if you excluded food and energy, but we can't. They're clear factors in our day-to-day lives. But it begs the question. It begs the question that I'm asking of the GOP today, because it's very clear what Biden thinks he's doing. Certainly they named his major legislative push, something he was able to put through, the Inflation Reduction Act, and we know that didn't make a difference. We can feel that gas prices are going down. I feel that in my pocket. I see it in my son's requests for money. I see it when I drive by different gas stations and wonder what it's going to be today. I've seen the drop. I believe it's been about 13 weeks straight of the drop. So I think we all thought one of those places where it's most obvious would impact the overall inflation rate. It hasn't had that much impact. Energy as a whole, still, the prices are going up. It's becoming more expensive. Food is still more expensive. And as long as those things are needed, and they are, the impact of them is real. But my question today, because we've seen, let's call it the minimal impact Joe Biden has made on inflation. I understand that presidents only have so much power to change some things economically. I understand that presidents benefit and gain from cycles in which they don't necessarily have much control over. There are macroeconomic factors bigger than what the president can sign into law, enact from executive privilege, and we know that. But Biden's at the helm. And if things are bad and the president's at the helm, you're going to be responsible for it. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you support him. I don't care if you loathe the idea of Donald Trump coming back. Biden's at the helm. Things are the way they are. They're not changing fast enough. And as we go into the next election, it's going to be clear for a lot of people, those dollars and cents are going to be what drives them to make their decisions. Now, I think that is less so for staunch Democrats and Republicans. They tend to vote for their party in many cases, no matter what. And they tend to believe that it's not their party's responsibility when things don't go well, and that their party would do a better job solving the problems. It doesn't matter the reality or the history of the parties and the economies, and quite frankly, the economies we're left with. We know Bush and Trump both left us with economies that were worse off than they were when they got there. 1,000 reasons. And again, that's one of those macro things where I can't say George Bush specifically is the reason the economy did X, Y, and Z. I could give you a list of reasons. Same with Donald Trump, COVID, the pandemic. People will use that as an explanation for him. They don't necessarily use it for inflation or the effects long term, but nonetheless, macroeconomics, where you are when you're there, tends to make you responsible for what goes on. Donald Trump's position before he left office and our economy was probably a factor. For Joe Biden going into this midterm, it will be a factor. Can't get away from it. But one of the questions you have to ask if we're a divided country, if people aren't working together to solve the problems that we have on a day-to-day basis, you have to ask the question, what is the GOP's plan for inflation? I searched for it. Because in my desire to have conversations with both sides, to understand what both people think we should be doing, I needed to educate myself on what the GOP's plan is. As I looked for the GOP's plan, it was interesting. The GOP put out from the Ways and Means Committee from the House some information. And I thought this would be riddled because the search I did was GOP's plan for inflation. And the first answer wasn't an ad. It was what Google found to reflect the highest significance or relevance in their search for the words I happen to use. And you could come up with any combination. And by all means, jump in the comments. Let me know what suggestions you have for what I should be searching for or where I should be looking to get what I would call the GOP's version of their solution for inflation. We know Biden, the Inflation Reduction Act, not meant to do immediate reductions. The feds are working on increasing interest rates to slow down the ease of borrowing. You slow down borrowing, you raise interest rates, things tend to go slower. We know when they do that, the GOP is going to say, we're going into a recession, even though we're trying almost to force ourselves on the brink of that so that we can slow inflation, because inflation is at a much higher rate than growth ever is. We could grow at a fast clip of 2.5%, 3%. That won't catch inflation. Wages are up 5% nationwide. That's not catching the inflation rate. So while there are positive things in the economy, demand is still high. People are still spending lots of money, and the demand hasn't been low enough for supply to be overwhelming and them start to discount prices for supply, them start to reduce prices for services. The normal pressures, it's not impacting things. So it made me wonder, what is the Republicans' plan? What is the GOP plan? So in this 3 pages of notes that I printed out, I got to tell you, about 90% of it is just talking about what Joe Biden hasn't done. And I get that politically that's advantageous. I get that politically it's easy to point to that. It's easy to persuade people, get people to take a look at this and say, hey, what is he doing? What is the plan? Are we going to be better off if we leave him in office and allow him to continue down the same road he's been on? Fair questions. GOP, Ways and Means Committee. President Biden has no plans to address inflation, and his current proposals will make inflation even worse. In fighting inflation, if fighting inflation is Democrats' top priority, they should stop offering partisan gimmicks and work with Republicans to get the economy back on track. And this is as the Wall Street Journal reported. So I kept going. Thought maybe they would offer me the plan. The next one, the Biden administration offered no real solutions. Just more Washington spending and higher taxes on Main Street businesses. I run let's call it a Main Street business. I don't feel additional tax pressures. And quite frankly, as a business owner with the resources to have an accountant, and I don't hire a tax attorney, but if I did, I'm sure I'd find even more ways that it wouldn't matter what the increase was. I'd find ways to get around it. So I'm not sure that that is the core of the current proposal, but that's what the Republicans, at least Kevin Brady, Republican from Texas, believes. He's on the Ways and Means Committee. Next, they said Republicans have focused on inflation, which hit 8.6% in May, the highest level since 1981, as Democrats' greatest vulnerability this fall. No question. Go for it, GOP. Go get them. Lay it out there. Force the Democrats while they're in power to do a better job. But I still want to know what your plan is if you get there. They've argued that the Biden administration policies, including his push to enact a $1.9 trillion pandemic aid package in early 2021, have helped fuel price increases. Sure, they're talking stimulus here. Pretty sure I can't imagine what it would have been like if we didn't have it. I understand that it increases the debt. I understand it put more money in people's pockets. But I do remember the amount of money put in people's pockets, and I don't remember it being particularly from unemployment and those other means, ways that they would become instantly wealthy, become middle class, have long-term better life outcomes. It did impact child poverty. I believe it was reduced in half in 2021. Yesterday, we talked about the drop from 1993 to 2019, a 59% drop in child poverty, prompted primarily by government safety nets. And we can have the debate. if you think people should have that safety net and how much the government should be involved in that. And I would agree in some cases that parents, adults need to get their act together, need to take more responsibility. I was absolutely in favor of the changes in welfare in '96 between Clinton and Gingrich. There have been massive changes in how we just give away money. People talk about it like we're still giving it away in groves. But then you see something like the PPP loans where people were getting loans and they were getting them forgiven. And I know that that was an effort to keep the economy alive. Whether you agree with the amounts or the forgiveness, I certainly know people have issues with loan forgiveness. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the money was out there. Some could say as a result, the economy is still pushing forward despite inflation. It is having a real effect on people. It's hurting people. But the economy is still pushing along. Demand is still high. People are still spending money, still going on vacation, still doing all of the things that happen when the economy is wonderful. But they're doing it against the backdrop of higher inflation. So again, I'm wondering, where's the Republican plan to deal with it? So the House, at least the GOP side of the House Ways and Means Committee, outlined policies that Republicans have advocated before, including rescinding unused federal spending. I'm for it. I'm for it. I'd like to see that scream from the rooftops. I'm for it. I get tired of pointing to Biden I like when they say Bidenflation. Okay, go ahead. Politically, it's advantageous. But where is that plan to rescind unused federal spending? I watch a lot of media, and I know there's bias, but I even watch a lot of right-wing media, and I'm not hearing that scream from the rooftop. I'm not seeing the leadership that says they have a better plan and doing this is going to change inflation. As a matter of fact, I'd like to know what the number would be if we rescinded unused federal spending. What is that number, and what do you think the impact will be on reducing inflation? I don't have a problem with that. I'm with it. Reduce, rescind, remove, get rid of unused federal spending. Who has a problem with that? Where's the leadership to make sure that that happens? I'm all for it. The next one says extending expiring tax cuts. Got a question about that one. If the expiring tax cuts are related to the $1 trillion that Donald Trump gave mostly to the rich, I'm not quite sure how that's going to change inflation. It may fuel better economic conditions for them, but you'd have to believe that trickle-down economics means that when the rich do better, everyone does better. And I think we have enough data over enough time to say that wealth has grown for the upper-income folks at a clip far greater than those wages paid by the people in that position. And I'll be the first to say, I don't have a problem with rich people making more money. I don't have a problem with them keeping more of their own money. It's theirs. It doesn't belong to the government. But as a solution to inflation, making sure rich people have more money and trusting that that's going to seep all the way down to wages, I think we have enough data to know that that isn't accurate. I am no economist. I don't mind being corrected. Jump in the comments, let me know. But I will say this, tax cuts for the rich who find ways to reduce their tax basis even when taxes go up for them, I don't know how that directly correlates to inflation going down. I don't understand the direct correlation. And we've seen some pretty record high profits for people even during inflation. So it's one of those things where I say, I understand people want less government. I understand people want the government taking less of their money. But when we think about big government and we think about the influence of government, I always wonder why people think the rich need better government support or they need the government further removed. They tend to find ways to accomplish things on their own. And the only thing I find funnier is when they get poor people to fight that fight for them. When they get poor people to look at one party as the solution, if that solution doesn't resonate all the way down to lower income folks. So I love when poor people fight to make sure that rich people get what they need. It's just one of those things we do. It's one of the gullibilities. Is that a word? People are gullible and they buy that. There was a meme, but boy, if I could access it really quickly, I'm sure I won't be able to find it fast enough. 3 people sitting at a table, a rich, let's call it a big corporate guy sitting in the middle, a middle class person and the rich person, the rich person's got a pile of cookies, huge pile. And the middle class person has 1 cookie and the poor person doesn't have any. And the rich guy looks at the poor person and says, are you going to let that guy take your cookie? Even though he's got a big pile of them in front of him. I'll come up with that meme. I'll pull it up. But we have convinced people, poor people, that they need to fight for the rich. I don't know how extending expiring tax cuts is going to change inflation. If you could put a dollar amount to that and explain it better, or use more of the 3 pages, and I don't mind showing you the 3 pages. Here they are. I'm on page 2. I'm at the top of it. And I can tell you the highlighted areas give you a glimpse of what the Republicans might do, but you can see proportionately there aren't very many. There isn't a lot of explanation, and I'm just curious what the expiring tax cuts will do for inflation. The next one they offer is increasing energy production and removing some regulations. Increasing energy production. I'm not sure what you mean by that. And in that discussion, I'll just say this. I had a discussion with a friend here in Southern California who said, man, Biden released 8.4 million barrels of oil from our reserves. Can't be doing that, even if it lowers oil prices. It was just the inference. I can't speak for him. A couple friends chimed in. And I was curious. Is 8.4 million a significant portion of our reserves? How long do we hold it? How much is our capacity? So I dug into it. So as I look at this one that says increase energy production, first I just want to tackle the reserves, 8.4 million barrels put out there. Did you know our reserves can hold up to 727 million barrels? And if releasing 8.4 million barrels at the time that was done to try to impact prices at the pump for American peoples isn't the time to release it, I don't know what is. I certainly know if we were at war or if there was a complete cutoff of oil production and we had no access to it and no means to get it, I can understand that you need to have that reserve. But the 727 million barrels of oil that we can store is about 1,207 days of energy in America. Now, I'm not even remotely suggesting that we not have that reserve or that we tap it arbitrarily to lower prices. But when we are in crisis, and if inflation is in fact as bad as we know it to be, is it not a good time to release oil from the reserves to actually help American people? I'm not sure I understand. If not then, when would you be releasing barrels of oil to help address the prices, the supply, the refining, the distribution issues we face here in America? But the GOP plan includes increasing energy production. One of the friends in this Facebook thread went on to say we need to have more leases. I think I've touched on this before. There are 9,000 unused leases. There are 3,500 permits. If I remember seeing it correctly, please jump in the comments and let me know if I'm not. I can see your comments when you put them up in YouTube and Facebook. They said, well, more leases. If I remember correctly, there are 3,500 unused leases that are out there, or permits, excuse me, not leases. 9,000 leases, 3,500 permits. There is plenty of oil drilling that could be done. But it's the energy companies that typically decide where they're going to drill, where they're going to explore, where they would like to produce the oil. And I think we make this disconnection and assume, again, Biden's responsible. He's going to pay. I believe the party's going to pay. And they should. If you don't perform for people, there's a price that you need to pay. I don't need the political rhetoric of the right or the left for me to understand the reality for the average person. They certainly like to play on it. They certainly like to make it all of their talking points. They certainly like to spend page after page talking about the failures of other people. But I'm looking for the leadership that shows how we close the gap, not for politicians on the left and right, but how we bridge the divide for the American people. So increasing energy, are they talking to the energy companies who claim there's a labor shortage, who claim that they are not confident that oil prices will remain high enough for them to make the investment in the additional leases, in the additional drilling, in the additional exploration? So if they're making a business decision that they don't think they're going to make enough money out of it, shouldn't you have an issue with them? I don't see the GOP complaining about oil companies not working hard enough for Americans to produce enough energy to help us lower the prices by increasing the supply. It is always interesting to me that politicians go after politicians, but politicians don't often reach far enough into the actual market that dictates prices, demand, issues. They don't necessarily go far enough into the leadership. And I don't mean creating legislation. I don't even mean creating regulation. I just mean responsibility for the outcomes for the average American person. Do they think we're stupid enough to think that it was just the other side that failed in every aspect of everything? Well, the reality is most people are gullible. They take what the news gives them. They take what the outlets that they choose that give them the information the way they want to hear it gives them, and they just point the finger. I'm looking for leadership. So in the question of what are Republicans planning to do about inflation, one of their issues, one of their requests is increasing energy production. How, where, who? Are you funding it? Are you going to make the private sector fund it? How is that going to happen when there's plenty of leases and permits available for people to do it, particularly as it relates to oil? I mean, we could be fracking for that matter. And I know they've been put in regulations to make it harder for them to ruin water supplies and the environment. But I have to ask, how exactly do you expect to increase energy production? There are steps that Biden has taken for that. If those didn't work, which ones are you suggesting? And where is a better description of those? I'm actually curious. You may have a better plan. It may do more for the divided states of America. In that case, I'm interested. Please give me more. And the other was removing some regulations. Hey, listen, most regulations are put in place for a reason. If the reason they were put in place is less important than the impact of removing those regulations, I don't have a problem with it. But you truly have to gauge the impact. You can't ignore it forever. It will affect people and it will cost us. So the analysis of the removal of the regulations with, imagine this is going to sound crazy, bipartisan research and information that explains to us what the impact of removing the regulation will do versus the impact of the gain that we get from the regulation being removed. These aren't, like crazy suggestions. At home at the dinner table, when you've got more bills than you've got money, you have to weigh out the benefits, the pros, the cons. Well, if the lights go off, X. If we run out of food, Y. If we can't get to work, Z. Every one of us has to make these basic decisions based on analyzing the facts that are in front of us. But the game of politics keeps that from happening. It keeps it from happening to the degree that I don't know that our current leadership, Republican or Democrat, will ever solve it. But again, the question was, because we can see Biden's effort and we can decide for ourselves if it's good enough. And based on the lack of reduction of inflation, I would imagine most people would agree it's not enough. But what is the GOP plan for inflation? The GOP goes on, and remember, this is quite lengthy in them talking about what Biden isn't, or what Biden isn't doing, and not telling me what they would do. Biden's economic policies have been so disastrous and inflationary that since March of 2022, nearly 40 economists have raised concerns about the looming recession. 40? I mean, come on. You could be more compelling than that. Excuse me. 40? The game of politics. Quite frankly, that's all it is. It isn't the concern. It isn't the divide. It isn't the leadership that will get more for you and I. It's not. It just isn't. Unfortunate. That's what we need. It's unfortunate. Up next, abortion. There's a glitch. There are things that I could be doing, like making sure I unmute myself. There are things that I'm hearing from friends and family that I can't thank you enough for reaching out and giving me. We haven't really put the show out to the public in mass. I do appreciate those of you who have shared the show. I can see the impact of that, but we're going to keep going at it. But next up, abortion. It's like that's never going to go away. It's not. Pro-life folks, and you already know my stance. I am pro-life. But I'm also pro-minding my business. I'm pro my life. I'm pro what I believe. I'm pro my religious beliefs, my faith. But I am not pro you have to take my vision of the world on. I would like the common interests of one another to be respected and considered. I would like us to have more respect for people making their own decisions. So the battle for me between my beliefs and how our system works, it is a battle in that, boy, I would love if more people had the same faith, had the same outlook, but it's not my role to enforce that. It's not my role to impose that. It's not my role to make that happen for people who that's not their thing. They're not interested in that. That's not their goal. That's not what they're looking for. And I respect that. I do. I really respect that. It's a challenge, against my own beliefs, but I respect that. I respect other people. I respect that divide. Having said that, GOP pollsters warn the party that this abortion fight, they might want to ease up on it. A North Carolina-based GOP pollster is issuing a warning to Republican legislators. Voters are ready to punish the party for restricting access to abortion too much. In a poll of 800 likely North Carolina voters conducted by Paul Shoemaker, a longtime GOP consultant who works on congressional and state races across the country, only a quarter of respondents said that abortions should either not be legal in any circumstance or only be legal if the life of the mother is endangered. Support for abortion restriction doubles if the procedure is permitted in the first 12 weeks of pregnancy or in the case of rape, incest, or to protect a mother's life. Even among Republicans, the poll found only 40% support a near total abortion ban, which, goes in the face of Lindsey Graham. He has put out a proposal for a nationwide abortion ban at 15 weeks. Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate minority, the Senate Republicans, I don't think he was in support of that, and I think he's just a realist who is absolutely concerned about maintaining power and realizes he will lose it. You, as a party, will lose it if you keep going after abortion as if that's what Americans want. There is a disconnect right now between the Republicans and the general public and the consensus. You need to look no further than Kansas. I thought Kansas would make it crystal clear to the Republican Party that even in conservative states, women want the right to choose with their doctor about their own health. It's really that simple. And as additional states, Tennessee, West Virginia, put a near total ban on abortion, as that quest continues 55 days before the midterms, there is obviously fear on the Republican side that will impact the midterms. Inflation is real. It's big. And I do believe that people still tend to vote for their party as if, I'm just going to go with the other party this time because economically they just do things so much better. I don't believe that. But people do express their frustration. People do show they want change by getting rid of the people they find aren't getting much done. So I understand the economic pressure is and should have an impact in the midterms. However, Republicans keep making this abortion issue big enough that it too could be a significant counterweight to inflation. We've seen that counterweight in action in places where, and this is what at least the initial fight against Roe versus Wade was. This is not a federal issue. It needs to be an issue decided in the states. And we're starting to see in many states they're enacting near total bans on abortion, believing that based on their legislature, is what the people want. But what we're not likely to see is a lot of those legislators asking the people. Because I think when they ask the people, I think there will be far fewer states that will even consider a near total ban or a total ban on abortion. The numbers are just clear, and the disconnection between conservatives as a whole or as a party and the people is real. So it'll be interesting to me that when they made that gain of getting it away from the federal support of abortion to moving it to the states, if it goes past the states to the people, I think we're going to see a different outcome. But they believe it should be at the states. I'm not here to argue that today. That's not the point or the issue for me. You know where I stand. But for the people who don't stand on the same side as me on this issue and me wanting to close the divide in America and let people live their lives as they see fit, I have to ask another real question of the GOP. It's not pick on the GOP day, but it's a real issue. And just as much as I think Biden is going to be held responsible for inflation, I think the GOP is going to be held responsible for their stance on abortion. With that in mind, what do you want? This is a real question for the GOP. What do you want from abortion? I understand the people that think it's murder. You're killing something that's alive. That in part is a religious belief based on life beginning at conception. removed from science, who believes viability occurs much later and that life itself could not exist outside of the womb before a certain point. And I know the lines where people, speak up and speak out on abortion, they move based on things like that, whether it's religion, based on science, based on viability, just based on a list of things. But I don't know exactly what the target is for Republicans today. And I'm not talking about state by state, because you can see some have, Lindsey Graham himself is putting out the idea of a 15-week ban. Some states want 6 weeks, often before a mother even realizes she's pregnant. And I said mother, in trying to be neutral, I should say a person. Obviously, it is a mother. But when you say mother, you're implying the baby and life and all of that. And I'm not trying to get into the full debate on abortion. I'm trying to understand the GOP's position on it right now. And I'm trying to do that because as they get into the midterms, their position is going to matter. Lindsey Graham stepped out, seems like an awkward time, on a divided issue where I believe the majority of Americans aren't for what he's suggesting. But he still suggested it. But Republicans, what do you want? Is it murder, or is it not? And if it's murder, why are there ever exceptions? Is it because there are hardliners in the party, or there are people who are more moderate about it? Well, I guess for the people that are more moderate about it, is it not murder, or is it murder but you feel like it's justified? Listen, I'm not trying to offend anyone's sensibilities. I'm asking a real question because I don't understand as a party where the GOP is going to land on the issue of abortion, because we see political turnarounds all the time. We saw one after Kansas. We saw politicians who were all about pro-life campaigning on it, part of their stump speech, who just flat out aren't mentioning it anymore. And, when the wind changes, politicians often change with it. But I'm wondering, from a party perspective, where is the party on abortion? I know they'd like the topic not to keep coming up, so Lindsey Graham's timing is really not great in their eyes. I don't have an opinion on their party's politics. I'd like to get away from party politics and it'd be more about the people. I know where the people stand on this, so I know the outcome would be different than the Republican Party. Kansas, again, made that clear. But what do you want? If it's murder, why make exceptions? If you're making the exceptions, what are they based on? What was the ban, or what was the idea that women shouldn't have the right to choose based on to begin with? If it's not that you think it's murder, and if you think it's murder, why does rape change that? And listen, again, I'm not trying to offend the sensibilities. I'm trying to ask real questions of the party that wants to take power and control, and we want to know what that's going to look like. I certainly don't get the sense that it's going to look like bipartisanship. I don't get the sense that they want to then, once in power, negotiate more with Democrats. I don't think that's the way it's going to be. Even with the Democrats still in the White House, I don't think the negotiations are going to continue. We've seen cycles of do-nothing legislators who, hey, the other party's in power, we're not going to allow anything to happen. That's not in the best interest of the American people. That's the part that concerns me. So what do you want? We know support for abortion goes up when you allow exceptions for the life of the mother. Is that ever really an option? Are there places that say, no, you cannot abort the baby, even if it means the mother's going to die? I mean, is that really an option? Are there places that that's it? I don't care. Let the mother die. I mean, what is this, House of Dragons on HBO? The medieval times where, it was a little more difficult to deal with some of the medical conditions? Even as a pro-lifer, I don't know that I would say mother has to die. Maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I'm not qualified enough. Maybe I don't get it. Maybe my religious belief isn't strong enough. I could use help and explanations how we would say, no, let the mother die. The baby has to live 2 lives. One's got to be chosen. We're going to choose this one. I don't even know how that's a part of the discussion, but I know it is. So when you get into rape, why does rape matter? Rape of a child matter. I know what the sensibilities. Rape of a child matter if you think that killing the baby is killing the baby. Where do you land, Republicans? Where is it actually at? What do you want? And I'm not to say that the Republican Party as a whole has to be in lockstep and everybody has to agree with exactly how it goes and exactly what everybody wants. But I am looking for a better target and a better understanding of where the Republican Party is at on that issue. Now, just a reminder, we're here weekdays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I appreciate you tuning in, especially when you get to do it live. If you can't catch us live, by all means, catch us on demand. We've got 42 other episodes out there. This episode will be out there soon enough for you to jump in, and feel free to comment. Even if you didn't comment when we were live, I will get back to you. I do enjoy that back and forth. Now, to try to further understand where the GOP is going with this, you can see the divide. Mike Pence has come out and had a different attitude on that very same question, which is sort of one of the beginnings of the question for me. Mike Pence came out and said he believes implementing a national abortion ban and continuing the conservative fight to restrict bodily autonomy. Okay, that seems like a little bias. This is from Rolling Stone. Let me read that again. Mike Pence says he believes in implementing a national abortion ban and continuing the conservative fight to restrict bodily autonomy. I don't know that that's how Mike Pence words it. He's trying to restrict bodily autonomy. That seems like a little bias. Just trying to point it out when it exists. I know where we get our media, what we consume influences opinion, so just trying to point out the obvious. But implementing a national abortion ban is very plain English. He'd like there to be one. He believes it's profoundly more important than any short-term politics. So if I read this whole thing correctly, and the comments came from an interview with Real Clear Politics, during which Pence urged his fellow Republicans not to shrink from the fight after some GOP legislators distanced themselves from the effort by South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham to implement a national abortion ban. Some Republicans are wary that the push for a federal ban could galvanize pro-choice voters in the November midterms and cost them highly coveted legislative seats. Again, playing politics. I get it. That's what politicians do. But doing what we need, what we want, taking into consideration what matters to us, it seems to me as if that isn't even a factor. So Mike Pence has made it clear what he wants. Mike Pence would be willing to answer the question, Republicans, what do you want as it relates to abortion? If it's murder, why does rape matter? Why does incest matter? Why would you kill something you think is alive in those two conditions? It could live and you could deal with those things. I know that's a harsh perspective. It is not mine. Not trying to offend the sensibilities, but asking the real questions, because if leadership is going to change and people have to decide, and the divide will still be there, because again, Republicans coming into power doesn't mean that people will all of a sudden start negotiating and find compromise and be bipartisan, which would be better for us. What does the other side look like? Mike Pence has made it clear. He'd continue down the fight and wouldn't care about short-term games in politics. Keep up the fight, make it clear. Stand tall to make sure that nothing changes. But as we go down that same road and we consider the fact that nothing might change, a recent report said 40% of our military has limited or no access to abortion care. Now, where that gets interesting is that our military serves in different places on different bases as a side. They may not be from a state that is for or against, but wherever they are, they have to deal with that current reality. And there's lots of talk about legislation. There's talk about how do you handle someone who comes from California, for instance, where it is legal and is in a state where they are working or have already made it illegal to get an abortion. What do you do? Because our military isn't in that state by choice. They're in there by assignment. They're there by assignment to do a federal job, typically on federal land. What resources do they have? This story was about a lady named Jay. Withheld. She's a Marine Corps reservist. She served in active duty during the troop surge in Iraq. She found herself in an unexpectedly pregnant, expected in that maybe she was trying to take precautions, but we know how you get pregnant. Just a couple months before her unit was set to deploy, at first, she wasn't sure what she wanted to do, but ultimately she chose to have an abortion. Jay requested that her name be withheld, like I said. Because her unit was entering a busy build-up period preceding a development when her absence would be noticed, and because the Marines in her unit were going through medical testing, Jay had to tell her commander. First, though, she thought she needed to gather the courage. She didn't know what his viewpoints were, and worried about if it would color his opinion of her. Well, I don't know that that should be a factor, but it is life, so those types of things are factors. We can't eliminate that possibility. Anyway, she then had to find an abortion provider, and because federal law largely prohibits abortions on military bases, she went to Planned Parenthood. There, she learned she was too far along for a medical abortion, and Planned Parenthood couldn't offer her the surgical abortion. Even though Jay lived in a large city in California where abortion was fully legal, she couldn't find a clinic that would provide her an abortion before she deployed. So she took 2 days of leave, fudging a story to the Marines in her unit about why she was disappearing, and a friend drove her for hours away to a clinic in another city. She wanted to deploy. It was what she had trained to do as a Marine. Today, she thinks about the Marines that are coming up behind her who may have the same challenge. A new analysis from the RAND Corporation estimates that 4 in 10 active duty military women are now stationed in states where they are currently or shortly will have no or extremely limited access to abortion care, a situation that could worsen the military's ongoing recruiting crisis. It even says 50% of women have hard times finding contraceptive care while they're in the military. What do we do? You know what people believe state by state, if we take it away from the federal hands, but you have federal decisions that are made on what states people are in, do you believe that based on what state you're in, even though you're serving the government and you didn't have a choice to be there, you just have to deal with the laws in that state? Should there be exceptions for people in the military? How do we handle military deployments in country for people getting access to things that in some states are legal and in some states they're not? Real questions. The divide is real. I know what a pro-lifer says. I know what a pro-choice person says. What do we say when we have that discussion together? That's my question. What do we say when we consider the fact that they're serving our country and shouldn't be punished by virtue of where they get assigned? Likewise, what do we say for a state that says there will be no providers here? And they have the legal right to do that. There will be no providers here. Are the exceptions that they do need to get more time off? They do need to get the ability to cover the expenses and travel to other places? Ironically, there's a website that I had some disbelief existed. I understand providing people with choices and resources, but I heard, and I could be wrong, this came from another talk show host I happened to be listening to yesterday. He said there's a website called abortion.ca.gov. You know what? It piqued my curiosity. I don't normally go to the computer while I'm on the show, but I'm going to do it just to see if that site is real. Please don't be real. Please don't. California Abortion Access. California taxpayers are currently paying for a website that is called California Abortion Access. It is part of the official website of the state of California, abortion.ca.gov. Listen, I understand personal choices. I understand the government providing people with resources. I understand the government helping people where they are not in position to help themselves. A long time ago, we decided that the government would not fund abortion because it was such a controversial issue, and asking people who firmly do not believe in it to pay for it seemed untenable. Now, there's lots of things that we pay taxes for that we don't agree with. This one, I don't know, don't remember the history, how it rose to the level where they decided, yeah, we're not going to ask everybody to pay for this. But it did. It got there. That was just a part of our reality. But what do we do for people in the military? It's just a real question. All of these questions exist. I believe, and you know I believe, our leadership does such a poor job at addressing any of these things. That's why the questions persist. That's why it ends up being part of the back and forth. That's why we don't make enough progress on enough issues. But what do we do for our military? No question. Real question. So, next one. Loan forgiveness. It's still in the news. 22 U.S. governors wrote a letter to President Biden saying, stop it. Let's not continue down this route. What do you think? It's a real question. It's a real reality. Loan forgiveness is coming, but 22 U.S. governors have decided they don't want to see it. People are concerned that it's going to increase inflation, and it's a lot of money, but we throw around numbers, we throw around billions all the time, and we never add it proportionally. Does $50 billion do something for abortion? I don't have the answer. I'm not an economist. Does $50 billion saved go to what? Does it go to places that would help the economy? Does it go to places that would increase jobs? Does it have a positive or negative effect when people have more of their own money? That seems like a logical question. Let people have more of their own money. But not having the whole loan forgiveness debate today wasn't the point. 22 governors, all Republicans, think that the loan forgiveness will burden American taxpayers and reward the elite few. I'm in agreement that the elite are going to benefit from this greatly. College, for the most part, in our country still has a whiff, a smell of being for the elite. Something as simple as people being able to afford SAT prep. And I know SATs won't be as prevalent in the future, but the ability to prep yourself for it increases your odds in combination with your grades and your public service and all the things you need to do on your application. But the means to get tutoring to do better on a standardized test to get yourself into college is a real thing. As a result, some colleges are getting rid of it. I get that. But college has always been for people who were better off and or who were kids of people who already went to college, know the process, understand the value, respect and appreciate it all. All of that is real. Biden has previously stressed that income-based eligibility of his plan is aimed to help people who need it most. But my understanding of the plan is nearly 42% of the people who will benefit are in the upper income areas, and only 12% of the people in low income areas are going to benefit from loan forgiveness. The first time I took a look at this, I said, well, I don't have enough information. What's it going to do? I understand what $10,000 more would do in the pockets of people. I understand for the people who went to schools that were closed because they were fraudulent. We give relief in bankruptcy. We gave endless amounts of relief for PPP loans to millionaires, endless amounts of relief. So I understood in principle that $10,000 in the hands of people who took out a $40,000 loan but now owe $200,000, I get it. Now, what I would have recommended, what would have made more sense to me, what would have made it a better plan versus feeling like it's just a campaign promise and a cash giveaway right before a midterm. I don't know that the cash will reach anybody, but, and not cash, but the loan going away to the tune of $10,000 to $20,000. Political gimmick. Would we have been better served if we figured out a way to reduce the 169% increase in college over, I can't remember how many years, versus wages going up about 12% during that same time? How are you supposed to pay for that increase? The only thing you could do is get a loan. When you get that loan and you have exorbitant interest, you could be chasing that for the rest of your life. Now, I understand that there are people who've been responsible and they've made the sacrifices and they've paid their loans. This is not a debate all over again about loan forgiveness. This is a question. Could we have done it better? I believe the answer is yes. I believe we could have targeted, if the federal government is behind these loans, we ought to be using our buying power to help cap, to help limit, to help reduce or minimize the cost of college altogether, rather than just feeding into the increases to the point where if I were running an institution and I knew the federal government was just going to keep putting out large amounts of money, guaranteeing large amounts of money, I know the government was doing it because they thought it was in the best interest of people, but the system has taken advantage of that and are using the willingness to give out that money, and they're increasing the prices at colleges to the point where it's not affordable, and you end up taking these loans. It's a vicious cycle. It's one of those cycles where, because you feel like it was government alone just throwing money at problems, they didn't consider the long-term impacts of it. We feel those long-term impacts. When our kids are trying to go to college and the price is so exorbitant, what role did our government play by putting out free money such that the colleges took the free money and just said, hey, there's plenty of money out there, let's keep raising the prices? The collective power of the federal government and our dollars should impact the things and the places the money goes. If we're going to be taxed, if we're going to have to pay, somebody ought to be doing a better job to make sure the impact of our dollars is real. It was the idea that the federal government couldn't negotiate drug prices for Medicare. Are you kidding me? If we're putting up the money, you ought to be able to negotiate every dollar you spend. I don't care what the logic and explanation was. It's not your money to not negotiate. It's ours. And if you asked us, do we think we ought to be able to negotiate drug prices? I'm pretty sure the answer would be pretty clear. That disconnect of common sense, I don't know, is it campaign funding from the pharmaceuticals? I don't care. That doesn't trump common sense for the average citizen who wants drug prices from big buyers to be negotiated to reflect, if we're going to give you all this money, you're going to charge us appropriately for the size of our buy. Again, a lot of people go to Costco and Sam's Club for that reason. Why our government with our money wouldn't makes 0 sense. There are so many things that don't make sense, but we don't hold our leadership accountable. Our leadership doesn't work together. Bipartisan is just a cute word they use on odd occasion when there's such a consensus, or people quite simply don't care about the issue enough for there to be a fight against it. This show is here to talk about those things, the divisive issues that divide our nation, the lack of leadership, the lack of direction, the lack of focus on the American people, when the focus seems almost entirely to be on party. And if you break down a person, ask them questions, no one is going to pass the litmus test of every aspect of a party. There are going to be times and issues and things where, quite frankly, they do want to see basics taken care of. They want to see people get a better education. They'd like to see people get health care. I understand that they don't trust the government to implement that. Quite frankly, neither do I. The government is not best equipped. They're not best qualified. But still wanting those basic solutions is a real thing. I would even go so far as to say, and a friend of mine, Jason, introduced the idea that there's a group, and I need to do this episode, there's a group that believes most Americans have lots of progressive tendencies. They want a lot of the things that progressives actually fight for. They just don't trust our government would do it. They don't trust the cost. They don't trust the long-term impact. And that's all fair. Nonetheless, I'll keep doing the show to keep talking about those subjects. I promise to get to the point where we grow this program and are debating it, discussing it, respectful, thoughtful conversations with lots of people. I've been doubted before and what's possible. I won't let any limitations get in front of our desire to build an audience of mainstream folks that don't like the far left or the far right, but want to be able to take care of their families, want to be able to send their kids to college, and something that would cost $35,000 not end up costing $200,000. They want basic things that our leadership, our politicians, the people in charge have failed to provide. Do I think government has a role? Yes, because greed and the private sector has also proven that they're not capable of getting it all right either. They can get it right to make money, but they don't always get it right for the people. That's it for today. You know what this is about. We'll keep doing it Monday through Friday. Some Fridays off. Some Fridays are real hard to talk about bad things. But at least Monday through Thursday, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. You can always catch us on demand. We've already done 43 episodes now. Tune in, give feedback, host@thedsashow.com. We'll be making changes and improvements to the show as we go. Your feedback is what allows that to happen, so I'm grateful to receive it. I really am. I appreciate all of your contributions to what I'm trying to do here. You know it is a passion project. It's something I do because I enjoy it. No other reason. It's those conversations you'd like to have at Thanksgiving, but you know your mother will look across the table with those eyes that say, if you want to keep eating this food, you better be quiet. Well, I don't want to be quiet. I'm not at the dinner table. I love my mother, but I've tried to create a forum where we can do it without disturbing that day. And that day is pretty important, so I understand. I love you, Mom. Nonetheless, this is the Divided States of America show. I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in. Share it with a friend, like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, follow the latest. You don't have to tune in every day, all day. There are topics and subjects that mean more. We'll do our best to make sure you know which ones are which. And if you subscribe, primarily on YouTube, you'll get a better understanding of that before you make your decision. I appreciate you being here. I'll see you tomorrow. This is the Divided States of America show and your host, Marlon Gardenero. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Divided States of America. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the channel and share this video with your family and friends.